Go to Select Committee.
Very good. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Scott Simpson.
Mr Speaker, the sponsor of this Child Care of Children Law Reform Bill has nominated the Justice and Electoral Select Committee to scrutinise the bill should it pass this first reading. And therefore, as chairman of the committee, it falls to me to have a first go at what can only really be described as a very sloppy and lazy member's bill by this member. The purpose of this bill, on the face of it, is to facilitate an evidence-based modernisation of the law relating to the care of children in New Zealand. And the bill, if passed, would require the Minister of Justice to request the Law Commission to review the law relating to the care of children in New Zealand, including preparation of a draft bill. Now, sir, the government is absolutely aware of issues surrounding adoption legislation, and the government has identified this clearly as an area for potential review. A review of the Adoption Act is on the government's work programme. But at practical levels, adoptions currently in New Zealand function pretty well. Most adoptions are open adoptions, and there is a much reduced demand for closed adoptions these days. As the sponsor of the bill indicated, same-sex adoptions can now be dealt with under both the Adoption Act and, of course, the recently passed Definition of Marriage Amendment Act, which makes it clear that the term spouse absolutely includes same-sex spouse. So the background to this bill, according to the sponsor, is that in the year 2000, the Law Commission produced a report, The Adoption and Its Alternatives, a Different Approach and a New Framework, and Parliament did then enact some of the report's recommendations when it enacted the Care of Children Act in 2004. Now, that replaced the outdated Guardianship Act of 1968. It firmly centred all decision-making, Mr Speaker, around the care of children on the principle, the very firm principle, that the interests of the child must be regarded as the paramount consideration when making decisions affecting children's care, health and well-being. However, adoption was left out of that Act. So therefore, this bill would require the Law Commission to update the 2000 report and the 2004 Act on the basis of subsequent relevant developments. And then this bill would require that the report back from the Law Commission be presented by the Minister of Justice to the House of Representatives with its recommendations as a draft bill. Now, this is in complete contradiction to the work already being undertaken by the government on the care of children by way of the family court reforms and the work being done by the Ministry for Social Development in terms of their reforms. So, as I said earlier, if this bill is passed, it would require the Minister to request the Law Commission to review the law relating to the care of children in New Zealand. Doing so would involve the preparation of a draft bill. And the reality is that there are very few stranger adoptions in New Zealand these days, in fact, less than 100 a year. So I think that whilst most New Zealanders, Mr Speaker, would support the modernisation of our adoption laws, as one commentator has said, they are, quote, literally a relic from the 1950s. But, Mr Speaker, I'm very aware that, in contrast to this once-over-lightly bill that's been presented by Ms Ardern, that the Green MP, Kevin Haig, has actually done a very significant and substantial piece of work and has a bill in the ballot on this very matter. His bill remains in the ballot. It's a hugely complex area, it's emotional, and it has huge impacts on people's lives. Just identifying the key policy issues is itself quite a task. But if Jacinda Ardern genuinely wants to make a real contribution, Mr Speaker, to serious and meaningful law reform in this area, then she needs to put in a bit of serious work. This bill that she's put forward is basically little more than a legislative request for the government to do something. It's not a solution. It's not even an attempt at a solution. The sponsoring member has acknowledged in her opening speech that it's an unusual, unique approach, and that it is. This bill is a very light piece of work. Essentially, it requires the Minister for the Law Commission to ask the Law Commission to review the law relating to the care of children and update its September 2000 report on adoption. It requires the Law Commission to report within 12 months a report, recommendations and indeed a draft piece of legislation. And further, it requires the Minister of Justice to introduce that bill as drafted by the Law Commission without amendment within 7 days. So there are significant constitutional flaws in this member's bill. There are absolute shabby constitutional issues that clearly the member hasn't addressed, hasn't even thought about. The first major flaw with this very sloppily drafted piece of legislation is that, if passed under this bill, there would probably be no law change for at least 4 years or more. And let's just have a look at the likely timings. A select committee would take about 6 months or more to give this member's bill consideration, given the looming summer break ahead of us. And then there'd need to be a second and third reading, and that would take a further 3 months or more easily. And then the Law Commission itself would need to draft its report, and that would take at least a year, probably longer. And then, of course, once it came back from the Law Commission under instruction, the government bill would have to be first read and scheduled, and that could take up to another 12 months. And then there'd be a select committee, that would be another 6 months or more. And then there'd be a second and a third reading, and at least another 3 months after that. So the problem is that the member sponsoring this bill is essentially trying to use her member's bill to get the Law Commission to write her bill for her. That's sloppy, that's lazy. It's a lazy approach, it's politically lazy, and it's intellectually lazy, sir. It's symptomatic of what we so often see on the opposition benches. On the members of the far left, on the socialist side of the House, we see that they make a lot of noise, they don't offer any solution, and then they ask someone else to sort it out for them. That's the approach that we see so often from the far left on that side of the House. The member is trying to legislate to force the minister to introduce a bill, but via the Law Commission. The second flaw with this bill is that it doesn't actually specify a single policy principle. Not one. It doesn't identify a single policy principle. It gives actually no direction at all to the Law Commission as to what should be in the bill or what its scope should be. Mr. Speaker, the bill doesn't even indicate whether it should discriminate against same-sex relationships. Every single detail is left to the Law Commission. It would effectively give the Law Commission a blank piece of paper. It's a constitutional affront to this House and to the members who sit in this House. Surely, if the Law Commission had an opportunity, they would merely just go back to what they reported in 2000 in their initial report. The third flaw that's worth noting about this bill, Mr. Speaker, is that the Minister of Justice would be required to introduce whatever the Law Commission drafts without amendment. Putting aside the rather important constitutional issues of making the Law Commission able to bypass Cabinet, it means that if the first reading is scheduled, the MPs have to vote on whatever the Law Commission drafts. It could not be amended unless it survives to select committee. I'm doubtful, Mr. Speaker, that the sponsoring member has even given any thought to the constitutional consequences or the precedent-setting aspects that this bill, should it be passed, would cause. It's very easy, Mr. Speaker, to write a 9-clause bill and trumpet that as some kind of solution, claiming that it would address a wide range of concerns about the outdated Adoption Act. But sadly, for the member sponsoring this bill, law-making isn't that simple, nor is it that easy, and absolutely nor it should be. If she wants to do some serious work, then she should put in the hard work. She should put some intellectual grunt into it and actually apply her not insubstantial brain to the matter at hand and actually proffer a solution. She should actually proffer a solution. So simply drafting this bill and asking someone else to do the job for you is a lazy way of ensuring that a prospective glittering political career falls in the dustbin. Sir, the government National Party MPs will be opposing this bill. It's a sloppy, lazy piece of legislation and it deserves to be consigned to the legislative rubbish bin.
Mr. Speaker.
We move to the 5-minute addresses. Sue Moroney.